talking about, but I think a really neat project and wanted to share. And one of the project leads is sitting here in the front row, so she can answer more questions in the hallway after if you want. This is Sarah Bristow. And it's a project called Communicate OER, and the idea is very simple. And that is that when the world wants to find something about a topic that they want information, what do? They go to Google, and what's the first hit in Google? A Wikipedia article on whatever they're looking for, right? And that's typically what happens regardless of what the subject is. So you type in open educational resources, you type in Creative Commons, type in anything. You type in online learning pedagogy, your first hit is usually the Wikipedia entry. And so a bunch of smart people, Sarah included, said, well, if that's true, we all clearly do think it's true, I do as well, then maybe we should pay attention to the Wikipedia articles about open educational resources, open pedagogy, open access, open journals, open science, open data, Creative Commons, etc. And that we collectively, we've got a responsibility to make sure those articles are up to date, accurate. Where there's not good information in articles, we should create those blog posts, write those articles so that the Wikipedia articles can point to them, and we can collectively create a better set of information so that when the rest of the world says, OER, what's that? And they type it into Google and it takes them to Wikipedia, that they actually get something that's pretty decent and that we're happy that that's what they're reading. Right, so that's the core of the idea of the project. We actually have a course in the School of Open about how to write Wikipedia articles, and Sarah's running a project with a guy named Pete on this. So if you're interested in this and you're a little bit scared of working in Wikipedia or you don't know how to write an article, please grab Sarah afterwards and she would be more than happy to chat with you. Okay. So this is Creative Commons, everything we're doing in 30 minutes. And so, and then with time for questions and answers. I'm at C Green on Twitter, so if you like these conversations or want to know what I'm thinking about, that's where you'll find all my latest thoughts and streams of consciousness. I also put it up in Facebook if you want to be my friend, or on LinkedIn, so I just kind of broadcast it to all those channels simultaneously. Of course, all these slides are openly licensed, and you're welcome to take them and sell them and do whatever you want with them. All you have to do is give attribution. So, I wasn't going to do this, but I bumped into a few people in the hallway who said, Creative Commons, what's Creative Commons? And I thought, I'll start a little bit early and hit this. So I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, but just, has anybody not really familiar with Creative Commons in the room? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to skip over this really quick then. So you all know that there's public domain, and if you're in the U.S., it's an unfortunate set of circumstances to get something in the public domain, right? First you have to die, then you have to wait 70 years, and then it goes to the public domain. For us in open education, we're following what David Wiley was talking about, that we actually feel a moral and ethical obligation to use the technical and legal tools of the day to help as many people get access to high-quality educational resources as humanly possible. We'd rather not die and wait 70 years. On the other end of the spectrum is all rights reserved copyright, which is fine for what it is, but what about those of us who want to share? Obviously, there's a middle ground here. That's Creative Commons, where you keep your copyright and you add an open license to your work so that you retain all your rights and you extend some rights and freedoms and permissions to the rest of the world under the conditions that you choose. And the conditions obviously are share alike, non-commercial, and no derivatives. So CC is a simple, standardized way to grant copyright permissions. You all know that there's different conditions you can choose. In education, we know that we try to stay away from the no derivatives licenses because, of course, educators, what do we like to do? We change stuff, right? We mash up, we create remixes, we modify. The odds of me taking your textbook exactly the way it is, pretty low. But if you give me permissions to make changes to it, it's much more likely that I'm going to take your book, modify it, use it in my classroom. So you mix and match those conditions, you get one of 6 open copyright licenses. And when you put this on a continuum in education, we say kind of most free to least free. We're not talking about cost here, because of course all the licenses are free. There is no cost to use Creative Commons. But what we're talking about is degrees of freedom. So how many freedoms are we giving to the rest of the world, to other users, to people who might want to use our works in education? And of course, putting something in the public domain, it gives the most freedom. There's not even an attribution requirement to the public domain. So most people know that of Creative Commons licenses, you keep your copyright, you add a license. Not everybody knows that we actually have public domain tools as well. So if you want to put your work directly into the public domain and you just want to give up your copyright, we have something called CC0, and you can put your work directly in the public domain. This is becoming very popular with data, with scientists, with researchers, with museums and archives, with metadata, because data, of course, you're dealing with a lot of it and from many different sources, and to try to keep track of attribution on data is very difficult. In the academy, we still give credit, we still give attribution when we use somebody else's data, but a lot of people are freeing the data by putting it directly into the public domain. This is a conversation we're starting to have in education around learning analytics. So as we're all starting to collect data, student interaction data, and providing custom pathways, using that data, providing reports to faculty and students in real time, there's a healthy conversation about, can we start to pool our data, putting it under CC0 so that learning scientists can get a look at it, so that we collectively can improve the OER in a data-driven fashion. And then of course, in open education, we try our best to stay up toward the top of this continuum best we can. And of course, there's reasons that people use all the licenses, which is why we maintain them. But in education, again, we try to stay away from the no derivatives licenses because the odds of somebody using our works go down. Most people are familiar with this as well. This is one of the reasons the CC licenses are global and that they've really become the standard for open education is that the legal code is solid. They're written by the best attorneys around the world. I'm going to talk about the new version that's coming out in just a moment. Our licenses are human readable. Any lawyers in the room? Okay, well, we can't make any lawyer jokes then. But, so lawyers love this, right? But for the rest of us who don't have the keen legal minds of our colleagues in the room, the human readable deeds are very, very simple. They're actually written at about a grade 6 level, and all these are translated into whatever language you might speak at the bottom of the pages. And then machine readable version, any geeks techs in the room? All right, this is the code in the licenses that allows you to go to Google Advanced Search and other tools and say, I want to search on algebra textbooks, but only show me openly licensed works. So that code allows machines on the web to essentially see the CC licenses. This is an undercount by probably half. Frankly, our metrics suck at Creative Commons, and we're working on that now. This is not a US-centric project, as you all know. This is a global project. Creative Commons itself has teams in over 74 countries around the world, and new countries are being added all the time. Now, to the update, why you came. So first, and I checked with our general counsel on this to make sure that I could say this, in late November, i.e. this month, the CC 4.0 licenses will be coming out. So the licenses have versioned over the years. We're now 10 years old. At Creative Commons, we're at version 3. That's what most of the world uses right now. Version 4 will be coming out at the end of this month. I'm not going to go into the details of the changes in version 4. For education, frankly, they're minor, and they're nothing to be concerned about, but I do want to make you aware of them. And so once 4.0 comes out and all the final decisions have been made, what our team will be doing at Creative Commons is providing webinars, we'll be presenting at conferences, for educators. So keep your ears perked. Many of you are on the OER listservs. We'll publish to all of them. These will be free webinars. We'll record them. We'll put them on our website. And we'll make sure that you know if there's a minor change to how you give attribution, what that looks like. There's a discussion around a minor change around share-alike. No changes, or you're not going to see anything in non-commercial, and nothing about no derivatives. So for our purposes in education, these are relatively minor tweaks. For other audiences, if you're in Europe, big change, you're going to be able to license sui generis database rights. It's a big deal to the Europeans. Couldn't do that with old CC licenses. You can with new licenses. There's also, you'll be able to use licenses to license data. So some people still want to retain the copyright on data in some parts of the world. The CC licenses are being adjusted to do that. So there's other changes coming, but I'm going to punt on that for now because the licenses come out in 3 weeks. We'll talk about it after that. Another big announcement that you're going to see in the next couple weeks is that the international governmental organizations of the world, so UNESCO, OECD, World Bank, United Nations, and others. We've been working with them for 2 years to get them to release their works under open licenses. So as you can imagine, the World Bank has a lot of stuff, and they've had an open access policy for some time to actually release their research works and have a policy that when they give grant funding to others to do World Bank work, that it be openly licensed as well under Creative Commons license. The other IGOs are international, right? They're not subject to any one legal jurisdiction. So what the IGOs really wanted and needed was a license, a Creative Commons license, that if there was a dispute in the license, they didn't go to court, they went to arbitration. There were some other minor things in the tweak, but that was the gist of it. And so the good news for all of us is what this means is the IGOs, UNESCO, OECD, and others will be adopting the Creative Commons licenses. You will see them release their troves of reports and data and educational resources out into the commons under open licenses, and, which is really great in and of itself, you'll see many of them instituting open policies, meaning when they give grants, they'll start to require CC licenses on grant monies that they give to others, which is a really good thing, because of course everything they pay for we can then use as open educational resources. But probably the most important thing is you'll see them signaling both implicitly and explicitly to their member nations. So every nation in the world is a member of UNESCO, for example, and the United Nations. They're signaling to their member nations that it's okay to release what their members produce with public funds under open Creative Commons licenses as well, which really starts to change the ballgame for the work that we all do. So as small as this is, with just tweaking the licenses a little bit, it's going to have significant impacts. You're going to see the IGOs start to put out press releases very soon. UNESCO will be the first. Other big projects that our team has been working on in education, I want to make sure you're aware of. And before I go into these, I want to preface this by saying the Creative Commons education team is very much focused on working on global projects with other like-minded organizations. So I see the board chair of OCWC, the Open Courseware Consortium just walked in, with Wikimedia, with the Open Knowledge Foundation, with JISC in the UK, with other orgs. Spark is another one that we partner with, and we're looking for big global projects that where a need has not yet been met, but we all have a collective need. So the School of Open is one of those things. A couple of years ago, we were in Warsaw, big meeting, having a conversation with not only the CC affiliates, but many of you were there, and these other organizations, and folks said, you know, as OER and open access and open science and open data, as they start to go mainstream, where do we send people? Where's the professional development site? Where do we send our staff to go get trained, to learn more about how do you use Creative Commons licenses? What is open access all about? What does that mean for my government? TJ works in Idaho in K-12. Where does he send the 3 new staff members that he's going to hire to go get a briefing on open education resources because he's busy and doesn't have as much time to relate to you? To mentor them. And so that was a niche, that was a need that hadn't been filled. We launched the School of Open, not only with peer-to-peer university, but with many other open organizations who said, yes, we want to have a really great course on how to build a Wikipedia course. We want to have, and so we partnered with Wikimedia. And we partnered with other orgs that said, and other individuals who said, I've got something about open that I'm an expert in, that I'm willing to teach others in a facilitated way, or I'm willing to build the course and let others take it at their own pace. So if you haven't seen the School of Open yet, the idea of the School of Open is the place where you can go to brush up on your open skills. Maybe you're an expert in OER, but you'd like to learn more about open access. Or maybe you're an expert in open science and you'd really like to know more about open data. And so that's the idea of the School of Open. If you just go to schoolofopen.org, you'll find it, and that's that. Another big project that spun out of this conversation in Poland a couple of years ago was the OpenPolicy Network. And the idea here is more and more governments around the world are starting to say publicly funded resources should be openly licensed resources. The public should have access to what it pays for, and that should be policy in our government. We're seeing this happen at agencies and ministries of education, at individual colleges and universities, all around the world. And so the question was, and we're seeing this in open access policies around research. We're seeing it in open data mandates coming out of governments. We're seeing it in public sector information that governments produce. We're seeing it in educational resources. We're seeing it coming out of foundations. We're seeing it coming out of government. So the question was, as this accelerates, and it is accelerating, who is going to support those folks with the talking points, the slide decks, the toolkits, the sample policies? Who's going to train their staff? Who's going to tell them, you know what? Is Pearson in the room? Pearson is going to come at you with everything they've got to kill this policy. And here are their arguments that they're going to make. And believe me, they do this, as does Elsevier and other organizations. And they will come and they will try to kill this with everything they've got. And here's what they're going to say, and here's how you fight back. Here are your counterpoints, here's the data, here's the research, and here's a set of global consultants who will stand behind you, come to your countries, testify in front of your legislatures, sit down with your governmental cabinets as need be. You're not alone in this. If you're willing to take the step toward open policy, there is a network here to support you. So that was the core idea. And there was a lack of that support that was ready. The other thing that we said was, so Spark was there, and Spark said, you know, we're really good at open access policy. We've got a history there. And Creative Commons said, well, we're pretty good at talking about licensing and helping governments understand that, you know, big surprise, it's actually legal to use Creative Commons licenses and it's compliant with copyright law. We're also pretty good at OER policy. And OKFN said, gosh, you know, we're pretty good at open data policy. And we realized a lot of us were working on open policies in different areas of the world, in different sectors of open. And so we said, you know what? We should pool resources. We should get together and act as a network. And we have a set of principles that we act by. So part of what I'm trying to do here is recruit you into this, by the way. Please send people to the School of Open. Please write School of Open courses. I also want you to join the Open Policy Network if you're interested. So before I jump into the specifics of the Open Policy Network, let's look at how funding cycles work today. So this is, this is for education grants. I've got one on open access as well, but I knew Nick would be here, and I'm afraid of Nick a little bit. He knows more than I do about open access. So here's the current model, right? Governments issue RFPs, they announce grant awards. Educational resources are produced, so the awards are made. There's peer review, usually limited at the grantee's institution, because it's the grantee that owns the copyright. Copyright sits with the grantee. There's no obligation to share with anybody else. What that means is the content's typically only used at the institution that received the grant. Public does not know about this work. They paid for it, but they don't know about it where it is. Therefore, the public has not only no knowledge, but no legal rights to use the work and no access. And so, big surprise, we get a poor return on public investment and slow learning because nobody knows about that thing that was produced. An open policy looks like this. It's almost exactly the same model. It's just that in the RFP, in the funding requirements, they said if you take this money, you'll put a Creative Commons attribution license on it, or whatever the license might be. Or it goes directly to the public domain. Different governments are doing different things. Same thing happens. The grant goes out, you still get the grant, educational resources are produced, there's still peer review. Copyright still rests with the grantee, and usually the governments retain a non-exclusive copyright as well. So you own it as a grantee, government owns rights, and the government says, because you took this money, you've got to put an open license on it. That's a requirement of the grant. Big surprise, content now can be used by anybody in the world. The public knows what was produced. The public has full reuse rights. You have accelerated learning. But from a public policy perspective, you've had a better return on investment. So when we talk about open policy, this is what we're talking about. As David Wiley likes to say, when you buy one, you should get one, right? And that's not the case today. Nick, how much do we spend in the US on research annually?
Over $60 billion a year.
Over $60 billion a year comes out of US agencies to fund academic research, and the default is closed, right? And that's changing. And now there's a directive out of the Obama administration that says we're going to shift the default to open after an embargo period, and it's free access. We don't yet have open access. We all understand the difference, right? Free is I can access it for free. That's the Coursera course. Open is I've got free access plus I've got the legal rights to do the 4 Rs. I can revise, reuse, remix, and redistribute the resource. If you don't have those legal rights, it's not fully open. So here's an example of, and Paul Stacy, who's in the back at Creative Commons, Paul talked about this yesterday. and Paul runs this project for Creative Commons and our consortia. But we're supporting the biggest OER project on the planet right now. The US Department of Labor put out $2 billion with a B, US dollars, to US community colleges to build next generation programs where there are jobs, where people are out of work, and where there's going to be jobs over the next 5-10 years. They're in workforce areas, advanced manufacturing, green technologies, healthcare. They said everything that's built with this $2 billion, if you take this money, you will put a CC BY license on it. If you don't like those terms, go find money somewhere else. Right? That's a proper open policy. And then we're following it up with technical assistance to the grantees so that they're working with each other, that all the content is properly marked, and it's got the CC BY license on it so that when it comes out, you all can make good access to those resources. So back to the Open Policy Network for a minute. This was the idea. We needed to get OER and open access and open data and open science on the radar of policymakers. People, not just CC affiliates, but others around the world were saying, I need help. We need support in our countries, working with our governments to help them understand the opportunities of open policy, but also implementing, writing open policies, testifying on them, getting them through our legislative processes. That we need a network to do this, we need good data, we need research, we need the arguments, and most importantly, let's not miss the opportunities as they arise. As you know, policy opportunities are rare, they don't come along very often, and when they hit, you've got a limited window of opportunity to respond to that policy opportunity, and if you're not prepped, or you're not there at the meeting, or the right people don't have the right talking points at the right time, that opportunity goes by and you may not see it again ever, or for many years. And so the idea of the network is we refuse to let any opportunities go by. So our mantra is no failed open policy opportunities. So the mission of this thing, and if you like these, please let us know, we'd love to have you join, is to foster the creation, adoption, and implementation of open policies that advance the public good. We're going to do this by supporting existing advocates, existing organizations, policymakers, and connecting policy opportunities with those who can provide assistance. So one of the core ideas was if there's an organization that already exists geographically where the opportunity is, that's where the network will route the opportunity. So if next week the National Science Foundation contacts Creative Commons and says, you know, we'd really like to have an open access policy on our research, we say, hey, Spark, you're in Washington, D.C., could you please go over to NSF and address this? And Nick's on the next bus around town. If Mozambique calls next week and says, we're really interested in open textbooks and we'd like to have no textbook costs in Mozambique, the first person we're going to call is Catherine Ngugi at OER Africa in Nairobi and say, hey, Catherine, this opportunity popped up. Could you hop over to Mozambique? But if Catherine's in Sweden, the network is committed to putting Larry and me and Sarah and whoever else on an airplane and getting them to Mozambique by Tuesday because that's when the hearings are and the government needs support. The network refuses to let open policy opportunities go by. So these are the principles, is that when we give advice to governments, we will be advising CC0 on data. We will be advising the CC BY license for content. We all agreed that, so we're going to give consistent advice. We're not going to recreate the wheel, we're going to leverage existing expertise. We're also not going to recreate principles that already exist. So the Budapest Open Access, what's it called? Budapest
Open Access Initiative.
Open Access Initiative. I just saw the acronym, couldn't say it. Is a really solid set of open access principles that the world has said, yeah, that's great. Like, let's do that. We're not going to recreate that. We're going to point at Budapest. The Cape Town Declaration and the OER, or the Paris OER Declaration. Really nice couple documents about what governments should be doing around open educational resources. There's no need to recreate the wheel there. We're going to say, we've got these documents, we're going to leverage them. We've got the patent principles around open science. Again, no need to recreate the wheel. So we're going to leverage what already exists. We're going to reuse what's already there. And we're going to say it's free for anybody to join. But if you join the Open Policy Network, you have to agree to the principles, and you have to agree to be part of the network and contribute as you are able. So it may be that you're not able to get on that plane to go to Mozambique when we need somebody next Tuesday, but if what you've got is a case study and you can write up an open policy that happened at your institution, that's a valuable contribution that you can make. So the work plan that we're working on this is right now we're spinning up a website. We've already got it. It's OpenPolicyNetwork.org. You can find all of this information with more detail, but it's a wiki. We're building out a website right now. And we've got a work plan. So all these partners said, well, what should we do first? And we listed it out. So we're going to start to connect policymakers to expertise. We're linking and cataloging and curating existing policies that are already out there. Again, a lot of this work's already done. You go to RoarMap, you got all the open access policies. You go to the OER policy registry, you've got a lot of the OER policies around the world. There's a lot of this stuff, and we're just linking to those things. We'll be sharing information, we'll be providing a baseline of assistance, we'll be spinning up talking points, slide decks, it'll all be openly licensed, it'll be on the website. So if you have an open policy opportunity, you just want to take the resources, take them and run. Good luck to you. If you need extra help and you want to talk to somebody, we're here to help you with that too. This is a new project. It's something that the open policy partners said that they wanted, but we thought it was going to be way off in the future because it was going to be expensive. Turns out some foundations thought this was a good idea. We just got this funded, or we're in the process of getting this funded now, knock on wood. And we'll be launching this very likely spring, summer of 2014. The idea of an open, or Institute for Open Leadership is, it's really great that we are in the room, but we need 20 times the number of people around the world who are experts in open licensing, open courseware, open access, open science, open data, who can go out and be advocates in their organizations, in their governments, in their scientific labs, in their research environments. And we've got to have that because we don't have enough of us who can respond to those opportunities. So this is a chance to build new leadership. So this is going to be an intensive, week-long, residential experience. It'll be fully funded, so we're going to find the best people around the world. And the target audience we're looking for are people who are up and coming in their organizations, who will be leading their organizations or having senior posts in the next 5 to 10 years. So we want the future leaders. We don't want today's leaders. We don't want today's existing OER experts. Some of those people will be instructors for this. We want people in your organizations, in your governments, who you think are really smart folks and are doing great work, and they're likely to be a vice president or a provost or a new lead of a scientific lab or what have you, or a legislator in a government. And you think that they're on their way up or they're highly impactful. They're going to have to come to this with projects. There's going to have to be an open policy component to what they do, and we're going to support them after the week to help them implement those projects. An example of this that's already kicked off is there's a European open education policy project where they're doing this in Europe right now to sort of kick off this idea. How am I doing on time? Where's my moderator?
Yeah, you got 6 minutes.
I got 6 minutes. Okay, I'm going to just say this and then stop and we'll go to Q&A. Another series of webinars that we'll be doing soon is we have a draft Creative Commons education strategy. This is an exercise we go through every year or so, and we try to update what is our focus at Creative Commons education, what will we be working on. We don't intend or want to do this in a vacuum. We want your input. These slides are already up on SlideShare. I'm just slideshare.net/cgreen. You'll find them. I also put them on Twitter, and there's a link to our existing strategy, and I've set the Google Doc permission so you can all see it. So please take a look at it, see what you think, and we're also going to have some organized webinars around this, asking for your feedback and input to make this better, because we know that we don't have all the best ideas that you really do, and we'd like you to help focus our strategy over the next year or two. Let me stop there and shift to questions.
You referenced OpenPolicy.org, will become a website soon. What's the timeline on that, do you know?
Yeah, so it's actually already up as a wiki. If you go to OpenPolicy Network, it should be the first link in Google, and you'll find it here. It's on the Creative Commons website. And all the details that I talked about, they're all up here, and we've been updating this. But we're building out a web page with some nice menu structure and pretty graphics and all that. So that's coming, but it'll, at least initially, be a lot of this same content. But we're already constructing case studies, white papers, collecting new information that we don't have up here that will be on the website.
And this is where you want us to point our friends who want to learn more.
Yeah, if you're interested in open policy, just send them to, the web address is actually openpolicynetwork.org. Yeah, Larry.
So in Brazil, for example, where there was a proposal to both the federal legislature and the Sao Paulo legislature, twice, to have an open policy, there was a lot of pushback and it hasn't gone through. And one of the reasons, and it's interesting because the Brazilian Distance Education Association, it just became the Brazilian, also the Open Courseware Consortium for Brazil, they said what happens is that